Welcome to Movies Are Life. I'm your host, Nathan Chandler. Today we are traveling to Paris and seeking out the world's best photo booths to discuss the 2001 international hit Amélie, which is number 33 on the 50 best rom-coms list. I'm thrilled to be inviting a first-time guest onto the podcast, Nikki Howell. How are you doing, Nikki?
I am outstanding. How are you, Nathan?
I'm doing great. So I haven't known Nikki long. Like me, she's a resident of Norman, Oklahoma, and we're both currently in the 2023 class of Leadership Norman, which is a program run by the Norman Chamber of Commerce. And from what I hear, we are the best class ever. Isn't that right? That's the word. That's what I've heard around the town.
I will endorse that statement.
So even though we don't know each other, I think it's fair to say extremely well. We quickly discovered early on in class that we have a joint love for all things kind of entertainment, television, and movies. And so I'm glad you accepted my invitation to be a guest, because I've always enjoyed your enthusiasm for all things. So I think it'll come across for this movie.
Well, I hope so. I hope that this is sort of a weird dream come true in a way. I'm like, I'm being a part of a podcast. All I do all day long are listen to podcasts, every and all genre. And now I'm being recorded. My husband was cackling at my anxiety. He was like, this is going to be okay. And I was like, all right, if you say so.
Well, that's what I'm here for, is just to make people's dreams come true, you know. So if people aren't familiar with Amélie, I think it's definitely a movie. Like, if you mention it, people are like, "Oh, wait, that sounds familiar," you know, which is kind of rare for international film sometimes. But it's also, and we were just talking before we started recording on this. I'm horrible with pronunciations. I've never been to France, so. Anyway, I'm going to murder a lot of pronunciations here, but Amélie, it's also known in France as the Fabulous Destiny of Amélie Poulain, I guess. But so Amélie was released in 2001 and is directed by Jean-Pierre Jeunet. The film is a whimsical depiction of contemporary Parisian life, and it tells the story of a shy waitress played by Audrey Tautou who decides to change the lives of those around her for the better while dealing with her own isolation. The film features a great ensemble cast of supporting roles. It was theatrically released in France on April 25th, 2001. The film received widespread critical acclaim, with major praise for Tattoo's performance, cinematography, production design, and writing. If people were familiar with it, it's probably because it was nominated for 5 Academy Awards, including Best Foreign Language Film and Best Original Screenplay. The film was a major commercial success, grossing $174.2 million worldwide against a budget of $10 million, and is one of the biggest international successes for a French film. So when I was starting to think about covering this list and I saw it, I was thrilled to see that Amélie was on the list, but I was also a little nervous because I was afraid. I was like, who's going to sign up for Amélie? And when you mentioned that was the movie, I was thrilled. So you kind of mentioned before we hit started recording, but I kind of assumed you said you had a connection to this movie. Is that why you wanted to discuss this?
Yeah. First of all, my husband believes he should be in this seat in this interview and not me. This is his all-time favorite film.
Oh, yeah.
It's his favorite movie. And in our early on in our courtship, we weren't dating. We hadn't been out on a date. We were just sort of embarking on a companionship where we would talk about the news or things we were sort of passionate about, or recommendations, with whether it be movies or books. And one day we decided we were going to exchange DVDs, our favorite DVDs. And I was like, I'm going to knock his socks off with mine. It was Into the Wild, the Chris McCandless story.
Okay.
So it's kind of based on true events. And this guy is like sowing his wild oats. He like rips up his social security card and totally goes off the grid and lives off the land. And the soundtrack is stellar. It's Eddie Vedder. I was like, I'm taking the cake on this. And then he hands over Amélie, which I had never even heard of. And I watched it and I was like, that was incredibly charming. But it's not a film I would have been expecting this 6'2" tall, you know, like big man to be recommending. And anyways, I was super charmed and couldn't wait to give him glowing reviews. and he absolutely shredded my movie. He was like, that movie was garbage. That guy's selfish. He blew off his whole family and then he dies starving on a bus. What the hell was that? And I was like, oh my God, you're right. So that's no longer my favorite movie. Shamed me out of it. I still love the soundtrack and will be an Eddie Vedder stan forever. But yeah, that was our first embarking on our relationship. He recommended that movie, and then it was, well, why don't we watch it together? And that sort of led to a first hangout. So,
Mhm.
and he just, oh, you may not know this. My husband has a background in film. He did lots of
Oh.
acting. In fact, a film that he was in won Dead Center Film Festival. This was a long time ago.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
but he's written, acted, directed. He paid for college by doing acting and performing gigs. So he's so much more passionate about this sort of thing than I am. But this movie, every time I see it, I get like a little butterfly. I'm like, oh,
Oh, yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that sparked a thing that led to my marriage, essentially. So I
Well,
do I do love this movie for that
well,
reason.
well, I'm a little nervous now knowing his background with all that.
Oh,
But
please do not be, because he and I we digest films entirely different. I am very engrossed in the plot, and I'm sort of gaming out the characters and inadvertently predicting what's going to happen next, and sort of recognizing the tropes and letting the story sort of unfold and taking context clues. John is watching the camera angles. He is behind the camera. He is like, oh my gosh, did you see they did that in one take? I'm like, what? No, I don't even know what to look for. So he's ingesting the film in an entirely different perspective. So um, do not be intimidated, because I'm not coming here with any prior knowledge that John would. He's probably at the door listening in, like wanting to interject any minute because he's so passionate about this.
well, I mean, you definitely, I think, passed a litmus test for sure, because that's a bold move to go with this film, not because of the film itself, but I mean, that's almost like, I think, introducing, when you introduce one of your favorite bands, to someone that might be dating and stuff, and if they totally hate it, you're like, oh, I don't know if this will
Yeah,
work out or not.
yep, it
But
was, I mean, he is not. So here's another fun fact about this film and sort of the history it has in my relationship. John and his brother, they're a couple years apart. They are super duper close, and they have this sort of, it's like a trump card that they're really careful with it. They don't deploy it just with any little thing, but if there's something that they want to recommend and they're like, I'm about to recommend something that's going to change your life, you have to read, watch, listen to this thing. And for John, it was Harry Potter to his brother, and for John's brother Michael, it was this movie. For
oh,
John,
wow.
it was like, you have to watch this. Stop what you're doing. Clear your schedule. You're watching this movie. So once again, I'm just building this movie up for its significance in my family or in my marriage and my relationship. But I think John and I have a different, ultimately, we have a different view of this movie. We've been talking about it a lot in preparation for this. And it's funny how we see it through different lenses.
Okay, I'm glad you said that, because very similar. I can't remember why I was originally so taken with it when it came out. I had to see it in college at some point. That's the only frame of reference that I can gather. I own the DVD as well, but it probably had been since then since I saw the DVD.
Mhm.
And I do think, like you mentioned, I can totally, watching it now, I could totally see maybe why I was so enraptured in it. All the things, the production design, cinematography, all that, still extremely stands out. The story itself, I could see maybe why I was taken with it a little bit more when I was younger than
Mhm.
I am now.
Yeah,
Did you feel like that?
absolutely. No, I mean, I hate to say that age makes you a little more of a cynic, but I wouldn't even call it, I wouldn't even say age. I think having children, um, I'm like, you're just going into these people's apartments. That's not safe. You don't know them. Something bad, terrible is going to happen to you. And yeah, there's a lot of that I'm reading the storyline. You really have to suspend, you know,
Mhm.
your disbelief. You just have to, go in the whole movie. It toes this line between um, imagination and reality. And to enjoy the film, you have to just totally buy in, because I can see why it could be a love it or hate it sort of thing. Like, it's maybe too fanciful or too whimsical for a lot of people. Um, but if you're someone that can just sort of allow yourself to escape into a movie and a plot and a story like this, it's so fun. It's so fun. And the imagery, the colors, it's like this green sepia toned something. It was shot in 2001, like, but it feels so much older. It feels like this nostalgic Parisian, sort of what we all fantasize about, like if we lived in Paris and we're
Mhm.
um, dining on a cafe on a patio on a Parisian street. It has that, but then it has these pops of red. It'll be this like green, brown, sepia thing, and then boom, a pop of red, and you kind of can't stop looking for that pop of red or blue or green or whatever the scene dictates. It's really fun, and I might be jumping around here, so feel free
No,
to
no, no.
be back on track.
No, I totally agree with you. I think it was a little hard to not watch this movie, but kind of think I feel like probably we've seen maybe a lot more films now in this style that lots of kind of fantasy type of imagery and even the colors and stuff. And I really do think I had to kind of think back and go, no, I think this movie really kicked off kind of a revolution, especially when telling something like a quote unquote rom-com movie of being a little bit more artistic behind
Mhm.
it. Cause yeah, it's definitely beautiful. And like, as you mentioned, the keyword there, imaginative, I really, that's actually what I wrote down in my notes of like, I particularly really liked the beginning of the movie and how it set up this world and just kind of what kind of, dreamlike state we are kind of jumping into.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I agree with you. Have you ever been to France?
I actually haven't been to France, and I've spent a fair amount of time in Europe, but haven't been to France specifically. Um, so I feel like I have to suspend the disbelief. I can It matches my fantasy. It and I know that Genet, the director, writer, producer, he had to do a lot of work to sort of capture that imagery, and it allegedly, legend has it, that it broke him. Because he kind of does everything under a bubble. All his movies before, he wants to control the wind, the lighting, every little thing. So this movie was, I think, the one and only time, or it was the last time um, that he did something like actually out in the world with where he couldn't control all the elements.
Oh,
And I mean, a lot like his characters, he's a little neurotic, he's a little OCD. So this was really challenging for him. There are scenes where they're in like a plaza, like outside of a train station, and there's not a speck of litter on the ground. There's not a leaf out of place. Like, it's it's spotless, and that I think nearly killed the man, just trying to control everything, because it had to match what he imagined it would look like. Which is also, it's just not real. Nothing is that pretty or that perfect or that controlled. So you really do sort of feel like you're in his head, but through the lens of this character he dreamt up in Amélie. Um, did you ever see The Shape of Water? I think is what it was
yeah,
called.
yeah.
Yeah, it has that same sort
Uh-huh.
of color and the pops of like red here and there, whether it's lipstick or high heels or whatever. It reminded me a lot of that. And Guillermo del Toro does a lot of the same stuff. Like, you're not in any sort of real world situation. It's all very like um, dreamt up.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of like I don't know if you saw his Nightmare Alley, but it's almost like we would like to think that's what like the carnies look like, or like back in the day, but I'm sure it was far grosser than what we see on screen.
100%. Undoubtedly.
Yeah,
Um,
but I like that connection that you make, because that totally makes sense of yeah, this movie very much I kind of wrote down that this was like an introvert's like fever dream almost, like almost kind of like, yeah, if I ventured to go outside, everything
mhm.
will be in its place. That completely makes sense, especially with the characters. I bet he saw himself almost as the glass man in
Yeah,
this role, as far as kind of shepherding, kind of being a mentor to Amélie, so to speak. But obviously never leaving his apartment, his
yeah,
dwelling. So
the control room. And what I something I observed, so I watched it again this evening and just to get it all real fresh in my mind. Something I observed is everybody's alone, with the exception of the one couple that early on in her investigation, trying to find the owner of that little tin time capsule that little boy left in her
yeah,
apartment. Um, Everybody lives alone. Everyone's alone, and I think the theme kind of is loneliness. It's introverted loneliness, and obviously solving that problem, which is why it sort of becomes a romance, is her sort of coming full circle. She's helping everybody, and then in the end, she is helped. And um, anyways, but everyone's alone, and so being alone, it borders on creepy because they're all peeping toms. They're all like listening in. They got
yes.
keys to each other's apartments, and like that's just once again not real world. But I think because they're alone and they don't have the white noise, the chatter of a full house of a partner or children or whatever, they are really in tune to everything happening around them and the other people's lives. And it's like, human nature is to enjoy gossip and what the people around you are doing. But they are all so in tune to everything that's happening around them and everybody else's stuff. But I thought that was odd. It was like, wow, there are no families. It's
Right.
just Amelie in an apartment, Dufayel in an apartment, Collignon, the grocer, he lives alone. Everyone, and the lonely landlord, everyone's alone. It's like, oh man, that's a weird thing I hadn't picked up on until today. Like, and maybe that's why they're so sort of eager to meddle in each other's lives, whether it's to punish or reward. She. Anyways, it was an interesting theme that I picked up on that I hadn't really like tuned into before.
No, that's amazing. That almost thinking about it that way makes me want to watch it again to kind of see it through that lens. Because I won't lie, I I know it's cliche for even people to say I'm an extrovert or I'm an introvert, and I've always said I'm a pretty good mix. Like I do enjoy social circles, but if I have a night to myself, I'm golden. I'm okay, type of thing. But this movie made me realize I'm maybe more extroverted, because these characters really frustrated me in a lot
Mm-hmm.
of ways. But you like just kind of like, oh my gosh, just almost in a way like get over yourself, like just and I like how the glass man does eventually kind of coax her to like, he kind of pushes her kind of like, what are you doing? Go out and live your life. And so, but you saying that, man, really makes sense, because what I did latch on to was the community aspect, of things. And I think it's easy to look at someone who might be very introverted and kind of think they don't appreciate community. And it's not
Mm-hmm.
that at all. It's just that they usually, I saw like a cartoon one time and it completely made sense. Like there's an introvert and they have a bubble around them. And it's like, once they let you into the bubble, like you're
Yeah.
in, you're golden. And I think this is kind of like what this movie is like, I like my community. This is who, is around me, and I'm okay with that. But the cat and mouse angle of this story, like my younger self, I really kind of was into it, because especially I know when I saw this, I was single, and just the kind of, just the little things that they do kind of back and
Mhm.
forth really appealed to me. I guess I'm becoming an old man. I was a little bit kind of. I mean, I thought it was cute, but I kind of,
Mhm.
in the same moment, was just like, just talk to each other, you two.
Yeah, no one's got this kind of time to be wasting playing like this
Exactly.
weird scavenger hunt. With yeah, I agree, and I that part I is not the part that my like older cynical self was like kind of rolling my eyes at. For me, it was more just the like the looseness with the rules and safety, and I'm like, in America, someone's probably got a gun. If you're sneaking into their apartment, you're in big trouble. Like, like I couldn't sort of like I said this earlier, code switch. I couldn't be like, um, this is this is Paris. This is like a small sort of neighborhood. Um, it's different, but I do remember being like, I kept having to check myself. I was like, you're in this in between world watching this movie. Stop trying to apply reason. There is no reason.
Right. And
Um,
I think a big part of this film too is also just celebrating those who dream. Obviously, like her imagination. I don't know. I know Whitney would definitely say this about me. I can be a realist way too often, I think, and so I don't know if I necessarily connect to that, like always kind of dreaming. Or were you ever that type of person at all? That um,
I think that I found myself identifying with Amelie in a lot of ways when she was a little girl. I had um I always had so much of the movie, so much of the film is very geared towards sensory stuff.
mhm,
Um especially the beginning when you hear the sound effect of the dominoes crackling, the her hand in the bag of lentils, and like
mhm.
it's really trying to appeal to all these like sensory things. And when I was a kid, I was very into that stuff. The sounds of the zipper, like I was always like zip 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 zip, or like clicking coins and like the ridges on a quarter, like picking up on all that the stuff and how it sounds and on different materials, and just sort of always playing a game in my head and patterns, a lot like Amelie was doing, as she was doing it as a remedy for loneliness. I was just a weird kid. And my dad would lose his mind because we'd be in a grocery store, and I can only step on these tiles, but I have to do it in this sequence, Dad. Don't you understand? And of course he didn't. He was like, you know, we got places to be. We got to go. Why are you such a weird kid?
Our youngest Hayden, who's 7, I mean, she just sometimes is just dancing in front of the mirror and talking, just whatever, and so I do like this movie because it kind of reminds it was a good reminder of to live in those moments as much as we're kidding around the kind of like who's got time to do all this kind of stuff. I mean, I did those type of things like for Whitney, like early on when we were dating, and this movie was kind of like, man, I really just don't do those things
Yeah,
anymore, and it's like it's so meaningful for both sides, of a relationship when you do make that effort. But this movie was kind of a good reminder. It's like it's cliche to like keep that spark alive, but it was kind of like, yeah, I probably should go. I probably should take my wife out on a date sometime.
that's funny. We had an opportunity to go on a date last night, and we decided we would do chores all day and then go on a date in the evening, and it was going to be the perfect day without a child. And then after doing chores all day long, we were pretty tired, and we were like, "You want to just go to Blue, our own restaurant, with people that we see every day, and eat the same food we eat all the time?" All right, sounds good. In bed by 10. But um,
Yeah.
no, I actually, when John and I began dating, it felt very romantic, and I did draw a lot of corollaries. And I wondered tonight when I was rewatching it, did John, because John, he would like deliver me a message in a bottle at work, and I'd pull out the piece of paper inside, which he had like burned around the edges to make it look really rustic, and it was like a map, a choose your own adventure map on like where we're going out on a date tonight. And it was like it was just all very, very whimsical and romantic, and that was like our first year together, stuff like that, regularly. And I did find myself wondering, did he draw inspiration from his favorite film, perhaps? Um, And if that's the case, I'm really lucky gal that this is the film he latched onto.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what's the saying? It's like plagiarism is like the sincerest form of flattery, you know?
100%,
But
yeah.
yeah.
He wasn't
What
posting pictures of me all over a train station, but
oh, do, do you like I think the performances in this movie, I almost think the supporting roles outshine those of the main ones almost. But did you like Audrey Tattoo in this performance? I think it
um,
was I remember her getting some American roles like after this film. I never saw it, but I think she was in the Da Vinci Code with Tom Hanks. But
yeah.
yeah, did you like her in this movie?
Um, I I've got to say, as a heterosexual female, I just can't look away from her. Her face is stunning to me, and she's got those like gigantic brown eyes and perfect face. I found her to be stunning. Her voice, everything about her was just dripping in charm. So, um, I thought she killed it. I just couldn't turn. I couldn't. If she was on the screen, I could not look away from her. I just have a little girl crush on her. Um, so I thought that she did really well. One of my favorite performers, though, in the whole thing, and this is probably going to be controversial because what the hell is this guy? But I think his name was Joseph. Maybe he's the creepy misogynistic narcissist that sits in the cafe
Yeah.
and records. But my God, you can't look away from his face either. And it's not because he's an attractive man. You're just like, this guy is so odd, but he just really nails this role, which was odd and it's really small. And then the character, the grocer's assistant, Lucien, I believe.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, One of my favorite scenes in the whole movie is when he's trying to say Collignon, Don the John, and he just really can't. But he also has these like big, giant brown eyes that just sort of sparkle, and a really compelling face, and um, so I thought the performances were pretty good. Do I think Nino, the love interest, was knocking it out of the park? Maybe not. So I don't know, but it's a different style. It's like you can't. It's like comparing apples to oranges with what we ingest every day with American films. So performance wise, I thought the leading lady was I can't imagine anybody else in that role. This is going to sound shallow and vain. I think she's stunning. I think she's beautiful. Um, if that character was not so compelling to look at, would we find some of her like neurotic tendencies to be less charming?
Right.
Maybe. Maybe yes, this chick is weird, but because she's so cute, you're like, she's precious and adorable. And so
Yeah.
maybe that's unfair to say, but
Yeah. But she does have that tendency where she's not going to mind electrocuting someone if she has to. Yeah, her smile kind of reminded me of almost that the Mona Lisa. The smile that you're like, wait, yes, that's a cute smile, but there's like something behind that grin as well.
yeah, there's something mischievous or something. She knows something we don't know. She has a secret, and yeah, I think she nails it. I can't do that smirk, and maybe I could do that smirk, and my husband would know what I mean with that smirk. But to be able to produce that smirk in an entire audience, like a global audience, is like she's being cute. Something's going on there. Anyways, so she has all my praises. As for the rest of the cast, I'd like to hear what you have to say, actually.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, kind of as I mentioned, the supporting cast kind of stole the movie for me almost in a little way. Like I almost was more caught up in the whole dynamics of Joseph, who you mentioned, and Georgette, like in the cafe.
Oh, yeah.
It's almost like I wanted to spend my
Amy.
time in the cafe more so than
People watching.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Like you, we might talk in a little bit later about the romantic chemistry. Nino, I'm kind of like, I don't really see what the big deal is about this guy. But once again, it is kind of a, I think especially with a foreign film, kind of maybe what, and especially the times too, styles change and all that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. But yeah, I feel like in the States of his jobs, maybe this is the older man coming out of me again, the old guy of like, okay, so this guy, he works at a sex shop and his other part-time job is at a carnival.
He's
Like,
basically a carny. Yeah.
yeah, where's this dude going in life, So anyway, that part of me, I kind of thought was funny. Like he didn't really, he's not what captured me in the movie. I think like everybody else did, but
Mhm.
I liked her relationship a lot, with her neighbors, and especially who you mentioned as well. I thought he stood out. Lucien, or
Mhm.
how did you say it, Lucien? But uh,
We're gonna say the American pronunciation, Lucien, because I can't. Yes, her like sort of defense of this guy who's maybe on the spectrum and clearly disabled, um, and his boss is kind of he's not a super villain or anything, but he's uncharitable. He's kind of cruel to this honest guy who maybe is just different. Um, but they both play their roles really well. If we're just dissecting the performance, um,
yeah, I thought it was just really well cast because the the faces to me seemed so memorable, and so I kept on looking up on IMDb like, where's other stuff they've been in, and I actually hadn't really seen them in other things, but they just have very memorable faces and they fit the characters really well, and so I really liked that about it. I know like it being a French film, I'm sure you know. I'll always talk about like kind of the best quotes from these type of movies. I feel like even maybe some of the quotes I might like are probably translated differently.
that's
But
a thing. Yep.
yeah, yeah. Did you have anything that stood out as far as?
Oh, I had so many quotes that I was like, I'll write it down because there's so much comedy in this film. Um, but it's all sort of like I don't shrouded isn't the right word, but it's just there's enough sort of darkness. It really does feel like you're in the mind of somebody because it can't all be like sunshine and rainbows and perfect. There's like dysfunctional relationships. There's like we keep saying the overlying theme of loneliness. But um there's some gross stuff and there's some orneriness and meddlesome stuff. But so one of the lines that I couldn't get away from being a restaurant person. Um, I cackled when I heard this the first time. Suzanne, the owner, limps a little but never spills a drink. I thought that was hysterical because in my old age, I can't run around that dining room floor anymore without getting like sore feet from my shoes. And so she limps a little, but she never spills a drink. But that is not my favorite quote. This one I thought was really stood out to me. Failure teaches us that life is but a draft, a long rehearsal for a show that will never play.
Mm.
It's like, oh, that's really insightful. And that was the failed writer. Um,
Mhm.
which is something that I'm going to skip around for a second. None of these individuals are like impressive people. They're not highly successful. If you look at it from the lens of you're in someone's imagination or you're in the mind of Amélie, who's an extreme introvert, and she's watching these people when they don't know that she's watching them. She's seeing maybe the side that they don't want seen all the time, or so the way that the characters are all developed. Every single character has their own little bio, their own little story, which is crazy. Which I actually learned that was one of Genet's things. He would see or think of a thing and just jot it down in a notebook, like the sensory thing, like loving to feel your hands on beans
Mhm.
or lentils, or so he'd write all these like funny little things, and they would become the identity of the characters in his movies. So you introduce a character and you don't say They are this old. They are married to this person. They
Mhm.
live on the street, and this is their job. That's not how she defines them. Their bios are they hate this, they love this, like
Mhm.
cracking of the creme brulee with a teaspoon. I know that's an Amélie thing, but they all have little funny things they love and hate, and they're just like weird, neurotic tendencies. But because that's how she has observed them, that becomes their identity and their sort of biography. I think is like a fun thing in the failed. That's a character, a failed author, and
Mhm.
then you have the hypochondriac in Georgette. You have the cafe owner with a limp. Like all these people are just riddled with imperfections, but they make up this like really happy little quirky community. I think it's just it's a fun theme that I don't think you would dig deep into if you weren't doing this podcast. Probably
Yeah.
like really
No,
analyzing this stuff.
no, I mean, you're exactly saying what I'm thinking is that's why I've really enjoyed this podcast because it's learning about those things that, that the things we like, the things we dislike. I mean, that's really what makes us up as people.
Mhm.
And I mean, it's probably the first thing I asked you when I met you in real life is, so what do you do? That's our go-to. And that's, even though that is a big part of our identity, well, some people still try to make that as their identity, but it's like at my funeral, I don't want people to talk about the job that I was working at. I want them to talk about the things that I love to do or that I love to discuss. And that's what I love. I do love this movie for that like sentiment of, especially the intro of this movie. I think I could watch the first like 15 minutes of this movie just because I love those little things. This person likes this and dislikes this, and yeah, very much so. I just that heart of, that's what, you get to, I think that's the joy of having children is, again, you get to see those little things just on display without them ever having to actually verbalize it. And as you grow older, right, you start holding those things close into yourself. You don't want to, and you don't reveal those things until you actually like, get to know that person or whatever. And so, yeah, that's one thing I like about this movie is like, is celebrating the person for who they are.
Mhm.
These kind of introverted, quirky characters. I don't think it's the movie is ever like making fun of them. They're celebrating them for, who they are, so even that kind of mean oafish grocer, he kind of gets his, I guess if there is a villain of this story, he's the most villainous, but he's really not really,
Yeah, he's probably misunderstood. We learned that his mom maybe overparented him, and like
Mhm.
the bookkeeper, the elephant, mom with an elephant's memory, whatever that means. He called her elephant mom, but maybe he was just a little too pampered for a while and doesn't know. Anyway, yes, I agree. There's not really a villain, but he gets his. And if his punishment is that his light switches or his light bulbs are changed with buzzing light bulbs, and his slippers are a size too small, and he accidentally brushed his teeth with foot paste, okay, justice was served.
Right. Yeah. I think this quote was also from this failed author, but I love this line. We pass the time of day to forget how time passes. I love that line too. So yeah, there's a lot of like meaty
Ooh,
nuggets, and this one was kind of crude, but the insult that grocer hurls out of someone peed in his mother, I had never
okay.
heard of that before, and I was like, oh man.
So you talked about this a couple minutes back, but how things translated. We have a really good friend who is who's from Nice, France, and my husband was telling me, yeah, I around the time this movie came out, I talked to his name's Sylvain, talked to Sylvain in depth about the film, and he really enjoyed it. Just thought it was so fun. However, most things translated like they translate accurately, but you lose a lot of the charm. Like for instance, when Lucien is talking about Colin John in the John, everything actually rhymes, so it's much more,
Mhm.
and it still kind of rhymes in English, but you lose a lot of that the charm in the translation. So I do wonder if some of these quotes would have or lines would have been more significant had they not maybe lost some of the elegance in the translation.
Right.
But your quote was awesome. I actually don't even remember that one. That's the thing. You're reading the subtitles, but you can't look away from the imagery and how stunning everything is. One of my favorite scenes is when she's on, or favorite shots, I should say, is when she's on the rooftop. And it's this wide angle lens, and you can see all the rooftops like for miles around of Paris. But she's guessing how many people are actively having an orgasm in that moment, which what a weird thing to think about. Or maybe it's not. It's not a thing I've ever thought about. But you're like, this is stunning. It's stunning. This angle is gorgeous, and it's like sepia toned. It feels so romantic. And then she like turns around and gives you that quirky little smirk, and she's predicted 15 orgasms are happening in this moment right now. Like, it's always balancing it. You're like, oh man, this is stunning. And you're like, oh, reality check. We're going to this funny, silly, quirky, crass place.
Yeah. Like, what are some of your favorite scenes in here? We probably hit on. I think one of the most memorable is, the prank she essentially pulls, in the grocer. I think that scene's real memorable. Is there another one that kind of stood out to you?
Oh yeah. So she had just reunited the owner of the box, the little time capsule box. And she's on this like adrenaline high, and she sees the blind man and takes him by the hand and says, "Let me help you off that curb." And then just like on that energy high, or that adrenaline high, she just takes him and narrates everything that's happening on the city street. And it's the everyday, simple, mundane things that happen in a city. It's the prices of cheese. We're passing this. The baby is looking at the dog, but the dog is looking at the rotisserie chickens, and she's just narrating everything she sees, and it's super fast, and it happens. It's like sensory overload. And then she just leaves him at the train station and says, bonjour, and is on her way. But that sort of like, that was probably my favorite scene, without a doubt. And he's just like, what did I just experience? I have been probably living and experiencing the city in blindness for however long, and I just got a little taste of what I've I guess been missing. Anyway, that was without a doubt my favorite scene. It was so fun. And then at the end you see his heart like just boom, 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 boom. It's just like this afterglow of, that was magic. Some stranger just came along, and can you imagine how impactful that would be if you were a blind person?
Yeah.
I don't know. That really moved me. There's another scene that I thought, oh, this one I have to nod to, or else my husband will be disappointed. But the rock skipping scene, where and it's mostly because of the camera work that they do, but they come from behind her on that bridge, and then over, and somehow you don't see a shadow of a crane on the water, and then the rock is skipping right into the frame of the camera, just sort of like that. It's just stunning. It's beautiful. The colors are awesome, and can't argue with it. And it apparently, they say, they being people like my husband who pay attention to this sort of thing, that was pretty monumental in the filmmaking world, like that angle. I do not know, but yeah, the blind man, that just like, it warmed my heart.
Oh yeah. That's an incredible scene. I also like, I don't know if it's fair to say like a full scene, but I think the moment when Nino's photograph starts talking to him with it's the same guy in the 4 frames.
Yes.
That was pretty revolutionary for the time, I think. And then I also just the initial photo booth scavenger hunt. Just how it all plays out. It's just a really
so clever.
It's clever, but it's just really fun. You get in the moment of kind of, even though it had been a long time since I'd seen this, I couldn't quite remember where it was going. And so you get really wrapped up, like, Nino trying to kind of figure out everything. And then speaking of that, the mystery man reveal. I had you probably remembered because you've seen the movie so many times, but I had forgotten like who the mystery man in the picture and why he's not smiling. And when that revelation happens, I loved it. Even watching it, I was just like, oh yeah, of course it would be the
Yeah,
would be the repair guy, you know. So yeah, I like that moment a lot.
it makes absolute sense, but that's so much of this movie is taking the most everyday, mundane, simple things and making them feel special or memorable or I mean I always feel this way about Seinfeld. Like his humor is just you take the most simple things, buying milk at the grocery store,
Mhm.
or how do they know when milk expires? So the cows tip them off, you know? It feels like that. Like they're taking everyday, normal, basic, um, simple tasks or chores or just happenings in a city, and they're magic. Like it's like you plant a little seed, and this imagination world blooms out of it. Like the invented story of the photo booth technician.
Mhm.
I mean, I think it's so fun, and um, I guess all the credit goes to the writers for running away with that stuff. Like, how fun would it be in to be in a writing room, like
Mhm.
like taking these turns and spirals into imagination land. I think.
It also it kind of made me think of it's always interesting like the houses we've lived in have we've bought from a previous owner, and when you live in a house, and especially we've been in a couple who have had kids, you know, they were younger when they lived in the house, so they've moved, you know, they've moved away, and so now we have little kids, but you see little every once in a while little momentum things here and there, like even like a toy car like buried in like
Mhm.
the sand, and like when she helps that man rediscover his little things, you know. So it's easy to get lost in your mind and kind of making stories of like, oh, that was, you know, that was a boy's, you know, who knows, maybe he lost that car and he always wondered where it went, and you
Mhm.
know, it's easy to kind of go off into those worlds when you see little you know, little trinkets, so to speak, you know, in places.
Yeah, I back to the tin box with the guy's treasures. You you can make assumptions like, oh yeah, he played with that car, or oh, that picture of the guy with the football or the soccer ball, he probably was just an athlete that guy thought was really talented and skilled and was his hero. But then you actually see, you go down memory lane with this guy, and in that portrait of that football player, whoever it was actually just the shield in front of the peephole where he would spy on his aunt in her sexy slips. It's just funny. It's like a normal everyday thing that you could draw a really basic conclusion from. It's not. It's not. Nothing's what you think. I thought that was so fun. It's like, and the marbles. Like, oh, he enjoyed playing marbles, so like put a marble in there. No, it took him back to this tragic day where he won 100 marbles and
Hmm.
forfeit them all. Like it's just so there's so much whimsy and fun, and so much of it's unpredictable. I can't stop myself from predicting the plot of every movie as I'm watching it, but this one's utterly impossible to predict. Nothing, you know,
Hmm.
nothing's predictable. It's all just completely unique and original.
Movie musings.
We were talking about these likes and dislikes that really make up a person. I was wondering what's a quirky little thing that you just really like, or something you just really can't stand. You you were talking, you know, being you know, textile or whatever. Is there something you can think of?
In my personal life or in
Yeah,
regards
no,
to the
personal life.
oh I am I can't handle clutter and disarray and lack of organization. Um, it I I'm not an OCD person, but that's the first thing that's gonna get my like blood pressure up, and I can't handle it. So um, even the littlest things, like if I had a label maker, I'd be printing things off and like this is this it's home. This is its designated place, and I would love it if this is where it stayed. In fact, we didn't have a child our kid was with his grandparents this weekend, and that's what I did. I spent my whole day organizing. I was like, there's not a little 4-year-old tornado that's about to blow this all to bits, so I can organize. So I think, and the nails on chalkboard and all the like that sort of thing. I am breaking bones or anything that sounds like breaking bones. I gotta go. I don't want to hear about it. I don't need to see it. Sports injuries, please leave me. And I played sports. I broke my ankle in a bad way, but I can't. I just can't. Like her submerging her hand in a giant barrel of beans. That I would be very into that. Like that sounds nice, but so I was talking about the sensory thing. She has the raspberries on her fingers when she's a little girl, and you can hear the sound of her
yeah,
pulling them off. That sound really actually kind of bothered me. I was like, ooh, I don't zeroed in on that. I don't think I liked that sound.
Yeah, you would really connect with my oldest because in two different occasions, it was either for her birthday or for Christmas. She asked for a label maker one year, and then she asked for a laminator. So anyway, yeah.
Okay, yep, I'm right there with her. Let's get some stationery supplies and knock ourselves out. Grand old time.
Yeah. Well, I alluded to it, where she kind of tortures this grocery store owner. But what's the best prank that you've ever pulled on someone, or maybe you're not the prankster, someone has pulled on you?
Oh man, I am not great at pranks. My best thing I got is hiding behind an unsuspecting victim, and I do this at the restaurant all the time. If I see a regular walking up to the foyer, I usually hide and try to pop out and scare them. And in fact, I did that today to one of our former partners who is in his mid-70s. What was I thinking? What was I thinking? I scared this man, and I could have put him in cardiac arrest. Okay, so this maybe isn't a prank, but I thought it was pretty clever. In the early courtship days, my husband and I, he was owning and operating 4 restaurants, and we just moved in together, and I had no idea where the heck I was going to find it, but I knew for sure he had to have a spare key. So I spent way too long hunting all over his house. Like I just said, we just moved in together, so there was still sort of things are off limits. Maybe I shouldn't snoop through his bedside table. That's weird. But I sort of put my blinders on, and I was just looking for keys. I found his spare key, and I sort of followed him around all day long. And anytime he'd park his car, I would run up, unlock the door, and sneak a little a love letter or a something silly or a picture that I had just taken of him that he didn't know I had taken because I was spying on him, and then go to Walgreens and print it off real fast and then put it in his car. So I hope he still has all that stuff. And maybe that wasn't a prank, but he never knew where I was going to be next. And I was just stalking him all day long and leaving little sheds in his car.
That is very Amélie-like. So that's probably what, knowing how much he likes this movie, I think that was what really, that's when he knew.
It's so funny because I completely forgot that I did that until you asked that question, and I had to dig deep. I'm like, is that even a prank? I was trying to be playful and flirty, but it might have spooked him at some point. How the hell did she get in my car? And how does she know where I'm at? I think there was 10 different times I unlocked his doors, got in his car, and left him a little token of my affection.
I can't remember if someone says this exactly in this movie, but I had written this down in my notes and bolded it. But everyone wants to be loved and wanted. I really like that sentiment because I do think that's true. And a big part of this movie was, and you talked about that scene with the blind man, but how she decides to kind of give back to mankind. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering what's a way that you like to give back, so to speak.
Sort of my latest thing is empowerment. I love to coach and teach and impart. If I have the knowledge or the resources, I want to share it because I I especially look at it with my my staff, my younger staff. I've got a lot of um, young women who are in their early 20s, or like, and it's a really tough age. It's a really tough time. I mean, it's not easy at any point before that either, but when you've got all this independence, I mean, it's as silly as, I shouldn't say silly. I don't want to discount anybody's struggles, but like, how do I change my oil? Hey, I need to find a gynecologist. I don't know how to do that. Things that aren't even related to the job that we do, but empowering them, encouraging them to vote and register and what to do. So, and maybe that's not going to really impact the world in some major way, but I would love it. I would love it if someday they looked back at their time in our restaurants fondly and thought, hey, they were really good stewards of young people. Not they gave me a job and I got a paycheck every 2 weeks. They taught me things about myself and life, and they made me feel empowered and stronger and encouraged. So that's really been a thing I've been super hyper focused on lately. So yeah.
Rom-com rankings.
What would you give the chemistry between Amélie and Nino?
This is hard because I feel like they had to do a lot of heavy lifting there towards the end, because I mean, in a 2-hour movie or whatever the length is, it's all just Amélie and her community and how she's sort of meddling in helpful ways. And then the romance really doesn't happen till the sort of the very end. So sometimes it feels a little or it feels rushed. It feels hurried. But then there's that kissing scene where they finally are face to face. There's no more cat and mouse game. He is at the threshold of your apartment. And she's just sort of like pointing where to kiss. And I was like, this is the sweetest scene ever. It's not carnal. It's just sweet and innocent, because they both sort of have this like childlike thing. So, but I felt like that built a lot of chemistry that they had to do sort of in a quick way. And they're both these like weird little introverts, and they have their own quirks, and they so I see the match. I see that it makes sense. And although we don't really get to know Nino very well, I think without that scene, I would be like, how is this a rom-com? So I think that I will give it 4 stars.
Okay.
Pardon me, 4 hearts.
Yeah. Yeah, you're being a little nicer than me, because I gave it 2.5, because like you said, this movie, it definitely is a rom-com, but it also seems so much more in the same thing. The Nino thing, like I see the seeds of why they're connecting, but as far as the movie goes, to like, I just need a little bit more dialogue between the two, a little bit more to kind of something to hang my hat on, now, like you, I do think the final scene is really good. It's a really good moment, where they meet and stuff. But yeah, I need a little bit more than sped up motorcycle, drive around, Paris to make me, really think, this is going somewhere. But, I'm sure there's been stranger people who have met before and have lived great lives. So
yeah, I will say though, that moped scene, that is every girl's fantasy. Being on the back of a moped with a little French boy, just cruising the streets of Paris. I mean, I think there are a couple Olsen twin movies that if you want to review those, I'm not your girl, but
I think if I start an Olsen Twins podcast, some authorities might be knocking on my door.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, we'll rule that out unless you're just the producer for your daughter's test.
Right. The second category I have is like the best friends component. So usually there's supporting characters or a best friend. This one's a little different because it's like we've talked about, Amélie kind of has her community. I usually put the guests on this on the spot about these ones, but I give this one 5 hearts just because I mentioned it before. I love the supporting character so much. What would you give it?
I really love the sort of paternal relationship she has with Dufael, the glass man. I mean, that's just what she's needed. She's needed a father figure. Her dad is so absent, and he has his own like OCD, neurotic stuff. Her parents just felt so. They literally were hands off. The only time he touched her was during her annual checkup.
Yeah.
So, I thought that was really awesome. And then her, I can't even remember the character's name, but her coworker that sort of vetted Nino because she cares. She's like, and you don't see any of that happening throughout the movie, but then it's like you said, the community, all these people actually do really care about Amélie. So I think the like sort of little village that she has built up around her, even though she sort of identifies as an introvert and a lonely person, she really, really relies and needs those people in those relationships, even if they're from afar through like, her looking glass. So I think I will also give 5 hearts on that. The friendships.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, makes me want to move to Amélie's neighborhood. It really is just so charming. I mean, I don't want anyone having a key to my apartment, but
right, you would have to count on a couple of people spying on you. You would just have to be like, that's just his thing.
Yep. Melissa's watching me, but it's a good kind of peeping Tom. He's making sure I'm safe.
I'm interested in what you think about this one as far as the soundtrack to this movie. And I'm not going to even pretend to pronounce the composer of this soundtrack, but what do you give the soundtrack?
I mean, it felt so Parisian. Actually, what I kept thinking when I was sort of contemplating the soundtrack was it sort of made me travel in time, and I felt like what I sort of imagined was, Hemingway when he was living there and drinking way too much, I don't know, whiskey or whatever, in writing and getting inspiration. But it sort of like made me time travel to that era. It just felt older, and it's like I said, the imagery, it just makes you feel like you're in what you fantasize about Paris or France. So in the accordion sort of music, like outside of a cafe, it checks the box. This is what my fantasy or my brain told me it would be like here. And the music totally supports all of that. Yeah, I don't know why I brought Hemingway into it, but that's what I remember thinking. I was like, is this what it was like when he was just there writing and being drunk all the time?
So on the scale from 1 to 5, what would you give it?
Am I going to listen to it in my car as I'm bebopping around? No, but I found it super appropriate, especially sometimes the melancholy piano. Sometimes there's this juxtaposition. You're seeing this thing that's on screen that's happy, but the piano is slow and sort of has this melancholy thing. So you're like, it kind of cues your brain. You're like, okay, what I'm seeing is more complicated than that. So I'll give it 4 stars. 4, not 5, because while it was perfect and appropriate, I'm not gonna go searching for it. I'm not gonna like listen to the soundtrack of Amélie when I'm doing my workouts,
Right. Yeah, I'm with you. I gave it 4 hearts as well. I was surprised that when I was watching the movie, how familiar it was to me. So I'm sure it's been used in other things since this movie because this movie was so popular. I was surprised at how recognizable it might have seemed. And even by the end of the movie, because it plays on the kind of same cues, like it's very easy to just remember the melody of it all and stuff. And listening to it through Spotify, I was a little surprised at how dynamic the score actually is, up and down. You kind of remember especially at the end, the moped, ride, whatever. Like you remember those parts of the soundtrack, but it's real beautiful. But like hey, it's time to clean the house. I'm not popping on the soundtrack, but as far as fitting the tone of the movie and everything, it's a really beautiful score. So yeah, I liked it a lot. Fourth category I have is the chase scene or the big declaration of love. I get, once again, I'm sorry, I'm kind of jumping the gun on this, cutting you off, but I gave this 5 hearts because this whole movie to me was a chase scene, essentially.
Yeah. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's so fun. It keeps you guessing. It's, I mean, who doesn't want to be chased like that? It's super engaging, and she's chasing after him on a Parisian street in this beautiful, like, sort of train station plaza with these stone stair steps. But more than that, it's creative, and she has to orchestrate so much and premeditate so much. I think I'm with you. 5 hearts, 10 hearts. Yeah. I say, who doesn't want to be chased like that? There's some creepy stalker stuff in this film, so I'm sure there's some people who don't want to be chased like that. But there's a line in the movie from the landlord, or the woman that lives in, I think she's the landlord. I don't know. She's the husband that died in the plane crash.
Oh yeah.
Hopelessly heartbroken over, but she says, "Has anyone ever written you like this?" Or her response is, "No, I am nobody's little weasel," because I guess that was a pet name or something. Oh yeah. So you said favorite quote, which it's not my favorite, but I remember being like, "That's so funny." No, I am nobody's little weasel.
Well, knowing the history that you have with this film, I may not be surprised what you give this ranking, but the rewatchability of this film, what do you give it?
Oh, I feel like I'm being gratuitous here, but I will give it 5 stars as well, because it being a foreign film, the first time you're just reading subtitles. Mm-hmm. If you really want to like dig down and appreciate the film and all the like beautiful imagery, you have to watch it without being glued to the subtitles. And like I said when we kicked this thing off, I just find Audrey Tautou. I'm gonna get in so much trouble for butchering that, but she is so watchable by herself. And then when I watched it, when we've just sort of had it on in the background, I'm playing the game like, oh, spot the spot of color, like, oh, we're in this like green blue sepia sort of washed thing, just looking for the color, or all the fun little cookies that they put in there. So mm-hmm. It's a 5-hearter for me, whether or not I have any sort of emotional ties to the film. You have to watch it. You have to watch it more than once to just take it all in. There's so much to see.
Yeah. I gave it 4 because I was actually a little surprised that I wasn't quite as taken aback about it, but through our discussion here, it's made me realize that that this movie's even a lot deeper than I initially recognized. It's a little hard for me. I'm not like a connoisseur of international film, but I say like 2 or 3 at probably a year or so. And so I'm accustomed to reading subtitles and that sort of thing. But I forgot how easy this movie is to still take in, because it's pretty fast paced. There's a lot going on visually and just information wise and stuff like that. I did, even though, and it's kind of funny saying the rom-com part of it, the romance, even though it is this chase, that's really not what sells me on the movie so much. And so just watching it from the rom-com perspective, I'm maybe not as high on, but as far as watching it as a movie and all the things that you talked about, like the production design, editing, all that kind of stuff, that to me makes it more of a rewatchable type of film. But I think it's also hard to keep in mind of, I think this movie really influenced a lot of films that came after it. And I think for a film to come out in 2001 and it making such an impact that it did, I think it's, especially with streaming now, it's so much easier to consume international films. And the fact that this film found an American audience and watching it now, it makes complete sense. It's like, it's almost like, oh, this is the Paris I always imagined almost, but so I think it sounds like this is definitely a movie you think people should check out. And the gnome in this movie, it had to, I mean, Travelocity had to steal from this movie, right? Like in their whole campaign slogan, of having the gnome in different places. Did you
I
make
hadn't
that
even thought of that. No, I hadn't made that connection, but that's so funny you said that, because I remember seeing the photos that she was like taunting her dad with, or like, I guess, baiting him into traveling himself. I do remember being like, these look familiar. They look stock, and maybe that's why. But that was so cute and so clever. Like, just another one of her schemes that, although we should say, not all of her schemes worked out, because Georgette and Joseph was a disaster. But
yeah, just, and I liked it about that almost, that it was just like, nope, Joseph is just a very, very strange man.
Yep, kick him out. You're no longer welcome here, sir.
Yeah.
But no, they had to have, but it probably wouldn't have made, a lot of Americans wouldn't have made that connection, because I don't think, I mean, like I said, I hadn't heard of the film until 2016 when I started dating John. So I bet it was a total knockoff, and I bet nobody picked up on it.
Recommendations.
I try to watch a lot of TV and movies and that sort of thing. Is there anything you'd like to recommend? Something you've been listening or to, watching, reading?
Yeah. Well, this is a commitment, so I have not successfully gotten anybody on board with this. But I recently completed reading the Wheel of Time series.
Okay.
And I'm like, I feel like I'm grieving. I finished it, and I'm like, I'm mourning that presence in my life, because it was so good. Did you read Harry Potter?
No, I just kind of missed that.
Yeah. That's okay. We can still be friends.
I did the first two. Yeah, I don't know if that counts.
Anyways, this feels like grown up Harry Potter in a way, and I don't mean like it's the same. It's the same genre. It's not. It's just the way that they develop characters, the way they world build. I think it's just so involved, and golly, who has this brain, this capacity to invent and imagine this whole space, this whole realm. And Robert Jordan is the author, and he kicks ass. He's so good, but he actually passed away early. I think he died at like 54 or something from something terminal. So he didn't actually get to complete the writing. I think the last 3 books were written by a fan. He was an author as well, but while he was on his deathbed, basically, they bring in, I can't even remember the guy's name, but they bring in this other author, and they say, we've read your stuff, we've taken a deep dive, we want you to complete the series. And it's 14 books, and then they added a prequel, so really 15 the whole stretch. But one of my favorite, also the transition was seamless. The new author came in, he knew where Robert Jordan wanted to take it. Like, this is how this whole thing ends, and it's seamless. You cannot tell it's a different writer. He totally jumped on board with the style. But my favorite thing about it is it's in this sort of pastoral time or era, but females are just as powerful as the male characters. So you go to a town or a village, and there may be a king, there may be a queen, and it doesn't matter. The females wield every bit of authority and power in every situation. They have a seat at the table in every situation. And you just don't see that. You just really don't. And so I love that they sort of empower females. And then as far as what I'm watching, was just so jazzed to see that Ted Lasso season 3. Is it season 3?
Yeah, season 3.
It started. We're soccer people in this household, so that makes it fun. But it's just, with all the sort of drama happening all the time, it's fun to have like an escapist thing, whether it's a podcast or music or a show. But this is kind of it for us. It's not without its complicated themes, but overall it inspires resilience, and it's lighthearted and happy, and he's so funny. And like I told you earlier, I like to I've made it sort of my role to empower our staff, or I'm coaching T-ball right now. So in Ted Lasso sort of has that, like, hey, at the end of the day, I might lose, but I will always win if I have taught you something or empowered you in some way. So that was the cheesiest thing I'll probably ever say in my life, but that's why I really, really love watching Ted Lasso. I'm like, I want to be a coach. I want to be a coach like that. I want to be someone who it's not about winning all the time. It's about personal growth and understanding and getting along with other people. Anyways, but if you're giving out recommendations, I'd love to hear them.
Well, I want to go back to Ted Lasso. We haven't been able to start season 3 yet, just because we haven't found a window to like dedicate our time. But we're big fans of Ted Lasso. This podcast is essentially ode to Ted Lasso, because movies are life. Football is life. So big fan of Ted Lasso. I've recommended it before, so I'm kind of cheating a little bit, but because we just finished it, I'm going to recommend again Shrinking on Apple. It's by the creators of Ted Lasso.
Yes, I want to see it so bad. I'm dying to watch this.
So we finished it, the 10 episodes. They're all about half hour each, so you can watch them really fast. Love the show. It just we liked it at the beginning, but just if you like Ted Lasso, you'll love it. But it's just got the perfect mix of drama and comedy. Harrison Ford is terrific in it. I hope he gets nominated for his role in it. But there's a moment in episode 9. I mean, I had tears coming down my face. It's such a touching moment in it. But yeah, check it out. You'll really like it. Now that all the episodes are up and it's been renewed, so it's coming back.
Yeah,
you could really watch a lot of episodes
and knock it out.
Yeah. Next week we're going to cover number 44 on the list, 10 Things I Hate About You, starring Heath Ledger, Julia Stiles, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who is actually already popped up on this list. So do you have any strong feelings about that movie?
The soundtrack is like, I was singing the praises of the soundtrack to Into the Wild with Eddie Vedder, but that soundtrack, 10 Things I Hate About You, might take the cake. I still listen to that soundtrack. And Heath Ledger no longer being with us is like, there are a handful of celebrity deaths that just really hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Kobe Bryant is maybe too soon, too raw still.
Yeah.
That was a hard one. Prince, Robin Williams, and Heath Ledger. So anything that he was ever in, I think is, it's just always going to be near and dear. But I'm actually not really a rom-com gal. So, but that one is up there and like some of my all-time favorite movies.
As always, everybody check out moviesareLife.com for reviews, episodes, and more. Thank you so much for doing this. So I know you said you were kind of nervous about it, but you're awesome. You did great.
Okay. Well, thank you. I'll probably not sleep tonight and be like, oh man, I meant to say this, or, oh shoot, what, man, I really fumbled my words a lot, but I appreciate the praise. This was really fun.
Yeah, I don't know how many people are out there really dissecting Amélie these days, but I mean, I think we might have got the market on this one.
Absolutely, yeah.
Real quick, I wanted if I'm hungry and I need somewhere to go eat in Norman, where should I go?
Well, if you want me to plug my restaurants,
Yes.
Blue Fine Wine and Food has some of the most outstanding, creative, clever pizzas out there. And if you go between the hours of 3 and 6, they're half price. So fun. And we recently added the truffle oiled mashed potato and pot roast sliders to the library menu. Personally, my favorite patio in town is the library. It's totally the neighborhood bar feel. The cafe lights. I mean, the like cobblestone patio. I mean, it's literally a converted house that's over 100 years old. It's original stained glass windows in the ceiling, but yeah, library bar and grill, one of my favorites. There are no books there, so don't go there looking for some light reading or literature. And then Blue Fine Wine and Food.
Yeah. Check those out, and very much a part of Norman and very close to campus as well. OU's campus. So yeah, great places. Some of my favorite places to go. So, and that was before I met you, Nikki. So I'm just not saying that. So
all right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you have a good night, and now that you have your kid back, hopefully you'll get some good sleep tonight.
Will do. It was so fun. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay.
Oh man, I've got to do that again. Yeah, thank you. My voice cracked right there.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.